Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I truly appreciate this opportunity to work with the LabRoots organization and to support scientific advancement in the cannabis industry. My name is Kirsten Blake, and I am the Vice President of Emerald Scientific. We are also the creators of the Emerald Test ILC PT program, which is the first and only internationally recognized interlaboratory comparison proficiency testing program for cannabis analytics. Emerald Scientific is also the industry's leading supplier for cannabis-specific scientific and laboratory supplies, calibration materials, chemicals, and equipment. Today, I'm going to speak with you about proficiency testing in the cannabis industry, why this is important, and the value these programs can provide. Some of you may not know what a proficiency test is, so let's review the official definitions. Essentially, a proficiency test is any activity undertaken by a laboratory to provide evidence that they are proficient to perform measurements. Also, according to ISO IEC 17043-2010, proficiency testing, also known as a PT, is the evaluation of participant performance against pre-established criteria by means of interlaboratory comparisons. So why are proficiency tests important? First and foremost, PTs are used to verify that a laboratory's analytical procedures are effective and accurate, and can be used to confirm their methods and standard operating procedures. These are also an important tool for identifying areas for improvement. We can use the data from PT studies to identify trends both within a facility and the industry as a whole. Additionally, you can use PTs as a tool to evaluate your individual analyst's capabilities. You may want to consider implementing this as part of your hiring and training requirements to avoid hiring individuals who may have misrepresented their experience and analytical capabilities. This has happened to more than one facility in the cannabis testing industry. Don't gamble with your reputation or your license to operate. So why is this important for the cannabis industry? Proficiency tests are an essential tool for ensuring consumer safety. Early on in this industry, there were what we called bad actors participating in providing false quality reports either by choice or they unknowingly lacked the skills required to generate accurate values for their analysis. This still persists as an issue in the industry, and while PTs don't test for ethics, they can at least test for a lab's competency in providing accurate results. The only way to combat falsifying test reports is through regular and consistent enforcement of rules and regulations, which can vary wildly from one state to the next. Additionally, by participating in PTs, you can help reduce the instance of product liability. Quality assurance testing ensures that a product complies with state and local regulations, which are generally focused on consumer safety, and knowing that these tests were performed accurately will reduce the instances of product recalls and potential lawsuits. For these reasons, it is important to note that proficiency tests are standard in many other areas of analytics, such as food, pharmaceutical, petrochemical, and environmental testing. By participating in proficiency tests, you can generate consumer confidence in labs and the quality of work. It is not uncommon to hear other parts of the cannabis industry bashing the quality and consistency of lab results. I have years of data that indicate that laboratories have consistently improved their performance in all areas of cannabis analysis as they continue to take on more challenging and difficult matrices. These tests do provide essential data for regulating agencies to hopefully consider in their decision-making processes. And finally, overall, we see that laboratories who participate in proficiency tests regularly tend to be more successful and exhibit improved performance overall. So now that we've covered the basics, you might be wondering what types of programs are available. There are a few state-run programs, some that offer round robins, and while not officially PTs, these can provide useful data if executed properly. Emerald Scientific has also worked with state agencies to implement internal programs to meet the unique challenges and regulations within a specific market. There are also ISO 17043 accredited PT providers that do provide testing material to the cannabis space. You can also work through distributors like Emerald Scientific, who provide a diverse selection of relevant PTs for the industry. These can be in the form of quick turn, otherwise known as blind PTs, that are available year-round, along with internal or practice PTs that play an important role in day-to-day internal QC operations or simply for practice. We are starting to see government agencies like NIST and standards organizations such as ASTM begin to roll out early exploratory tests. When it comes to interlaboratory comparison programs, there are a few limited options specifically focused on hemp. And as noted earlier, Emerald Scientific offers the Emerald Test ILC PT program, which offers a broad scope of tests and analytes specifically chosen for their relevancy to the industry. I am going to provide a very broad overview of the tests that are currently available and why we do these analyses. What is available? Well, as you can see by this extensive list, you can really pick your poison. Starting with potency, we now offer multiple cannabinoid options in a variety of matrices. Accurate potency numbers are essential for consumers to correctly dose for their desired outcome. It is also important to understand the various cannabinoids in your product as they can impact the desired effect or treatment. Cannabinoid content influences the price of the product and, as in the case of hemp, its legality, as it is only legal at a total THC content of 0.3% or less, so accuracy is critical. I want everyone to understand that the analysis of a homogenized, randomly selected sample will provide more accurate average of a batch. Cannabis plants do vary in potency throughout the plant, so those pretty little crystallized buds at the top of that plant are more potent than the material that is lower and deeper within the plant. So next, let's talk about residual solvents. This test is primarily applied to extracted products. Sometimes manufacturers use inappropriate chemicals or processes for extracting cannabinoids that can lead to unsafe residues remaining in the product. Additionally, some manufacturers will use cutting agents in their products, which is why we now offer PTs for tocopherol acetate and propylene glycol, as these can lead to health hazards as exposed by the 2019 vape crisis. And while terpenes are not a required test in many regulated markets, consumers are starting to have a greater interest and understanding of how these aromatic hydrocarbons that influence flavor and aroma work in conjunction with the cannabinoids to deliver a preferred experience or potential medicinal benefit. Interestingly, Nevada is one of the few states that lists dominant terpenes on product labels. Because the analytes we test for here are so volatile, this is one of the more challenging PTs that we offer. So next, let's talk about pesticides, and this is where my interest in the industry was first piqued. I had naively assumed that most cannabis was grown by eco-conscious growers out in the hills, and of course they would do everything organically. But now that I understand the value of cannabis as a commodity and view it as an agricultural crop that can be subject to a myriad of pests, mold, mildews, and other problems, I could see why a grower would turn to pesticides and fungicides to protect their investment. We've all heard cannabis called weed because it can grow like one, right? But this is not always the case. When the wrong chemovar is planted in the wrong environment, it will struggle with pests and disease. Similar to tomatoes that have been bred for hot climates, and when they're planted on the coast, they struggle. And just because you want to grow the newest trend, super purple cotton candy, lemon skunk mind bender, you may not have the ideal environment for it to thrive. Next up, let's talk about heavy metals. Hemp, which is cannabis by the way, has been used for bioremediation for toxic sites for decades and is known to uptake toxic metals quite efficiently. Interestingly, our PT data indicates that most heavy metal PT failures are with proper reporting of arsenic. Mycotoxins. Here we're referring to aflatoxins and ochratoxin that can inhabit cannabis as well as many other crops. Aflatoxins are highly toxic secondary metabolites produced by the Aspergillus fungi, as is ochratoxin, and this can also be produced by Penicillium verrucosum. Both water activity and moisture are important to measure, as moisture can lead to harmful microbiological growth. And on that note, we offer a very broad selection of microbiological tests as well. Some of the most recent PT additions that we've brought about are pH stability, Staphylococcus aureus, Pseudomonas, and foreign materials. And here we're looking for things like bugs, metal shavings, rodent droppings, and other undesirable materials. So what is a matrix? This refers to the material in which we are looking for the analytes of interest. First, we started with solvents, and this is where it all started in 2014 with a simple delta-9 THC test in an acetonitrile solution. And while some do criticize in-solution PTs, these are metrologically traceable and can provide valuable information about your analysis from injection to detection, so you will be able to identify if you have a problem with your analytical system before you introduce more complex actions like sample prep. Other matrices do include hemp oil, olive oil, MCT oil, hemp bud beverages, isolate, gummies, brownies, chocolate, and most recently, cosmetic cream, which should be an interesting analytical challenge as this is comprised of both hydrophobic and hydrophilic materials. As the industry continues to develop new and interesting products, and there is no shortage of creativity in this industry, we will continue to work with our suppliers to bring relevant options to the market. So next, let's talk about the Emerald Test. The testing program was an integral component of Emerald Scientific's initial business plan as a means to both improve the science and quality of analytics being performed in the industry and to give us greater credibility in the scientific community. The test first launched in 2014 and was the industry's first nationwide cannabis interlaboratory comparison proficiency testing program. When enrollment was first announced, we had a few labs that were really excited and saw this as the right direction for the industry. But after only a few initial sales, we heard only crickets. So as good salespeople do, we hopped on the phone to talk to laboratory owners and the directors. And I want you all to understand that the testing industry was in a very different landscape back then with little regulatory oversight and only a few ISO 17025 accredited facilities. So we received responses like this. So you want me to pay for a test that's not required and it might show that I don't know what I'm doing? I don't think so. Well, regardless, we were able to gather enough participants to launch the first Emerald Test. So what is the Emerald Test? It is an interlaboratory comparison proficiency testing program, also known as ILC-PT. Our goal is to help establish an industry benchmark for cannabis and hemp testing while providing valuable feedback to each participant's quality assurance system. The test is offered biannually in the spring and the fall. Because it is an interlaboratory comparison program, you can see how your results compare to others in the industry, and all of the data is anonymous. This data is hugely beneficial for the industry as we are able to identify trends and areas for improvement. For example, with the inaugural test, we gathered a group of 16 participants who were at that time primarily using gas chromatography for potency analysis. Our sample was delta-9 THC in a solution of acetonitrile, so this was an appropriate means of analysis. But by the fall of 2016, we were analyzing 5 cannabinoids, which included the acidic forms of THC and CBD. And by that time, all but one participant was performing their analysis by HPLC. This illustrates how rapidly the trends in the industry have changed in both analysis and the equipment that is involved. So let's get back to the program. If you perform to an acceptable standard, you have the ability to earn the Emerald Badge for that specific area of analysis. The badge program was initiated to give labs a brass ring to reach for and to provide marketing support for their bragging rights. Unique to our program is that we consult with an advisory panel, which is comprised of industry experts and stakeholders representing a diverse mix from various areas of the industry to provide relevant input and insight. It is important to note that some state regulations do require testing labs to participate in annual and biannual PTs, and this is also required if you are seeking ISO 17025 accreditation, which will require you to take a PT, if available, for each area of analysis for which you are applying for the scope of your accreditation. The Emerald Test is approved by the primary accreditation groups such as ANAB, A2LA, Perry Johnson Labs, and RJ Lee Group. It is also important to note that currently all samples fall under the rules for qualifying as DEA-exempt materials, which allows us to ship these samples nationwide and internationally with few exceptions. Pass-fail criteria is determined by the ISO 17043 PT manufacturers, and while some tests are graded by standard mean, others are graded by known value, which is metrologically traceable. This is also determined by the ISO 17043 PT manufacturer and can change as more historical performance data is gathered. Unlike other areas of analytics, currently, at the time of this presentation, Field of Proficiency Tables, known as FOPT tables, which provide specific guidance for establishing passing criteria and test design, do not exist for the cannabis industry. By leveraging the input of our advisory panel, our customers, and ever-changing regulations, we continually advocate for new and improved tests that are relevant to the needs of the industry. This graph, recently generated by New Frontiers Data, illustrates the expansion of the Emerald Test ILC PT program since 2014. And while I recognize that this slide may be difficult to read, what is important to note is that over time, we have continued to add new tests and matrices to address the industry's analytical needs. All right, so let's get to the data already. How it's delivered and what does it mean? Initially, you will receive an individual performance report for each test in which you have participated. This is generally what your auditors will review. After we've completed a statistical analysis of the testing round, you will receive a full report with a data summary. In this example for pesticides, and this is from the spring of 2020, and this is just a little subsection of the pesticides here. A statistical summary was provided. And here you can see that more challenging analytes, such as abamectin, which is circled in red, will have a higher standard deviation than those analytes easier to identify, such as boscalid, which is circled in green. ZScore data was also provided, which easily identifies standard deviation results by color. Also provided were Z-score graphs and Gaussian normal distribution plots. The way data is visualized and tracking this data historically can provide insights into the challenges and improvements both in performance and analytics and the design of a test. So who should participate in proficiency testing? As I already noted, any lab seeking ISO 17025 accreditation, and obviously if you are a lab required by state regulations to do so, but also in-house quality control and R&D labs should participate to ensure that your analytics are in alignment with the industry. We are also seeing an increase in equipment providers participating to ensure that the equipment and methods they are providing to the industry are capable of providing the analytics required. So let's touch upon some brief highlights from the most recent fall 2020 round of the Emerald Test ILC PT program. It is worth noting that the labs were all very responsive during the test period, even though there was a global pandemic. Potency performance is solid, but in all cannabinoid tests, CBN, CBD, and CBA had significantly higher standard deviations than other potency analytes, which indicates that these are more challenging to accurately quantify. Terpene analysis continues to be the most challenging test, with beta-caryophyllene proving to be the most difficult analyte. In some microbiological tests, we increased the number of samples in the test, and the pass rate remained the same. But with aspergillus molds, the panel increased from 3 samples to 10, and the pass rate increased by 5%, which was unexpected. With the mycotoxins test, the pass rate was 2% better than historic performance. And for pesticides, the average recovery of the certified value improved from 88% to 96%. In reviewing participation, we had a total of 123 different cannabis and/or hemp testing facilities enrolled for the fall Emerald Test, representing 30 states and 8 foreign countries. This is the 13th consecutive round that the number of participants has increased. And while some labs were unable to submit results, it is noteworthy that 610 PTs were entered for review, which culminated in 511 Emerald Test badges being awarded. It was also noted that this round continued a significant trend in the diversity of enterprises participating in the Emerald Test. The program is now being utilized by regulatory bodies, equipment manufacturers, method development entities, cultivators, extraction businesses, and consumable product creators. Fall 2020 results indicate that matrix does influence accuracy as represented in this bar graph, illustrating the potency results for both hemp bud and hemp oil. Potency results have shown consistent improvement over time with an average pass rate of 89% over the history of the test. Additionally, labs have demonstrated exceptional results across other matrices, including gummies, beverages, and hard candy. The combined pass rate was 97%. The graph here illustrates that gummies present a greater analytical challenge for potency analysis than beverage or hard candy. We just completed enrollment for our spring 2021 round. So here's the summary of the enrollment. We had 139 individual labs enroll, representing 12 countries for a total of 761 tests. So the enrollees comprised of cannabis testing labs, hemp testing labs, instrument manufacturers, government labs, and cannabis product manufacturers. So let's talk about some key insights and what might be coming next. According to New Frontiers data, growth in the cannabis sales is expected to more than double in the next 4 years. Recent legalization activities in several states, the influence those will have on the surrounding states, combined with the increased acceptance of the need for regulatory oversight and testing requirements, positions the lab testing market for exponential growth within the next few years. In this highly competitive market, it will be more critical than ever for labs to differentiate from one another through accreditation and proof of analytical capability. We are seeing a notable increase in manufacturers and cultivators embracing and investing in in-house testing capabilities, and we expect to see this trend continue as we move toward improved processes such as good manufacturing practices, otherwise known as GMP, of which testing is an important component. This will influence domestic and international trade and thus requiring a greater demand for quality analytics. Looking to the future, CBD is a hot topic right now, and pun intended. The highly restrictive 0.3% threshold for THC content in hemp-derived products reinforces urgency for precise quantification capabilities. It is still uncertain how and to what extent this market segment will be effectively regulated as it applies to consumer safety. And next, I'll talk briefly about Delta-8. This is a rising player in the CBD hemp market. In this presentation, I'm hesitant to navigate the legal framework of Delta-8. Similar to a stormy day, it appears to be dark and gray. But there is much controversy surrounding the popular cannabinoid typically derived from hemp-based CBD. What I can address is that there is an issue in the testing industry where some labs are unable to accurately differentiate between Delta-8 and Delta-9 in their analysis. We are working with our suppliers to help address this problem by delivering a Delta-8, Delta-9 proficiency test before the end of the month. So what are the challenges we continue to face that pertain to proficiency tests? First, cannabinoid tests must meet qualification for DEA-exempt materials. This means that they must be below 1 milligram per mil in THC concentration. We are also unable to ship samples in a solid matrix above 0.3% THC across state lines, and this is unlikely to change until we see some form of federal legalization. The exception to this may be if you have a DEA license to handle Schedule I drugs. The vast variability across state regulations makes it difficult to create tests that are relevant for all markets. Also, as noted earlier, we are a young industry and still lack enough historical data to determine passing criteria as typically referenced by FOPTTO FOPT tables. And finally, we continue to work toward customer education and as to the value of proficiency testing programs and what they provide to the industry. Participation in these programs goes well beyond just a marketing opportunity. Participation contributes to the overall advancement of cannabis science. I'd like to acknowledge my references. And thank you. I truly appreciate your attention and interest. And a huge thank you to the Lab Roots organization for allowing me to participate today and for all they do to support the cannabis analytical space.